And sisters, I'm pro-life leader Frank Pavone, National Director of Priests for Life, bringing you a word of greeting and encouragement on the occasion of the Ohio March for Life. I would be there with you if my travel commitments weren't taking me elsewhere, but I have been with you in the past, but I thank you for your commitment, whether you're participating in the March for Life or not. The commitment that the pro-life movement has shown in Ohio over so many decades, the work that you have done to make your state increasingly a reliably Republican vote. Of course, I remember the many elections in which Ohio was one of the key swing states, I think especially of 2004, when I, together with so many others, worked so hard for the re-election of George W. Bush. With my friend Tony Moss, and a shout out to him, and thanks for the great work at Ruah Woods in Cincinnati, bringing the theology of the body to so many people. I've spoken there multiple times. But he and I and a team of others flew across the state from place to place prior to that 2004 election, and I gave my personal endorsement to George W. Bush, and praise God for his two elections. He gave us, of course, Justice Samuel Alito, who authored the Dobbs decision. But I thank you. I thank you for all the work you've done. We across the pro-life movement and around the nation, of course, are very aware of the burden that Ohio carries, thanks to the amendment that was passed in 2023, not by the conviction of the public, mind you, but as you know well, by the deception of the public. And I want to address that for a moment and how we continue to move forward after not only Ohio, but various other states, and we worked in conjunction with the leaders and groups in all of them that face these battles, how we are to go forward with these provisions that I do not use the word enshrine because that refers to sacred objects. I use the word impose, that these amendments impose abortion on demand on our state constitutions. You know, the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe made it very clear that never in the history of America, either in our federal constitution or in any of the state constitutions, was a right to abortion asserted. That is only for the deception of our times. The time since the mistake of Roe v. Wade, the grievous error, as the court has now admitted, then channeling into various states passing these amendments. This is the anomaly. It is not the historical record. It is not the norm. This is the departure from the norm, and in more ways than one. Not only the constitutional history and the legislative history of the United States, both on the federal and state level, or the scholarly commentary that has taken place over the years. Nowhere do we find this asserted right to abortion. And yet, nevertheless, this is what we're laboring under now. I want to reflect on this for a moment. First of all, thanking the Ohio legislators. Brothers and sisters, no sooner did that pro-abortion amendment get imposed on the state of Ohio did the legislators speak up, insisting that they would not let the pro-life laws that have been the object of so much effort, sacrifice, work, and prayer over so many decades be simply swept away, especially when the amendment did not mention a single law. I want to thank the legislators. I want to thank them for the efforts they're continuing to make, and all those throughout Ohio who are continuing to work against the efforts of the pro-abortion movement to try to use this new amendment to the Constitution to wipe out not only the work of decades, but the conviction of decades. And that's something I want to emphasize. Some think that these amendments, and they will claim in their rhetoric, codify Roe v. Wade. They do no such thing. When Roe v. Wade was in effect, there was nevertheless, and in large measure due to the leeway that the court gave to the states to pass all kinds of reasonable restrictions and limitations on abortion, there developed, under the Roe v. Wade regime, a big consensus, a strong consensus among the American people about what limits and provisions there should be regarding abortion. For example, limits on late-term abortion, protection of taxpayers from having to fund abortion, of parental involvement, 24-hour waiting periods after informed consent. These and many other provisions that have saved countless lives over the years in Ohio and elsewhere. These are things that the American people, despite the ongoing fundamental divide on the abortion issue, have come to a consensus about. Amendments like were passed in Ohio and various other states, imposing unlimited abortion, throw out the window the careful consensus that has emerged culturally, reflected in opinion polls, has emerged legislatively and judicially about how far the so-called abortion right should or should not go. Continue to stress that point. Continue to expose the extremism that these amendments impose on our states. Because the convictions of your citizens, your fellow citizens in Ohio, have not changed. Ohio has not bought in to the extremism that this amendment represents. In fact, do an experiment, and I'm advocating for polling on this very question, that you ask people whether they voted yes on issue 1 back in 2023. And if they did, ask them, okay, how would you vote if the amendment said there shall be no information given to a mother who's about to have an abortion regarding what the abortion procedure is, what its risks are, and what its alternatives are? Or how would you, in fact, vote if it said whether or not there should be an opportunity for that mother to consider that information? And you go on and take all the reasonable laws, restrictions, and regulations on abortion, so many of which Ohio has implemented over the years, and ask them outright, if that were on the ballot, how would you vote? And guaranteed, so many of those who voted yes on issue 1 would vote no on statements that actually draw out the implications of that amendment. There's another dimension to fighting the amendment, even now that it's in the Constitution, and it's this. Let me read, as you're very familiar with in Ohio, the wording here of this amendment. Every individual has a right to make and carry out one's own reproductive decisions, including but not limited to decisions on contraception, fertility treatment. Now look at number 3, continuing one's own pregnancy. And then it goes on, miscarriage care and abortion. Okay, continuing one's own pregnancy. This amendment cannot be legally understood as simply the right to end one's pregnancy by, of course, killing the child by abortion. It is also the right to continue one's pregnancy. Why do we have to, and why is it so important, so helpful to emphasize that? Because, brothers and sisters, as our friend Dr. David Reardon, who was recently right here in this studio at Priests for Life, from which I'm bringing you this message, and who has done repeated research on this throughout the decades, Dr. Reardon reported to a group of pro-life leaders gathered here not long ago for our regular meetings that some 60% of women getting abortions today in America can say that it was against their preferences, against their choice, sometimes even to the point of severe coercion. But whatever the degree of the coercion or the degree of the unwillingness, well more than half, almost 2/3 of the abortions in the United States are not this free and voluntary exercise of choice. Given that, a person who forces an abortion, a person who pressures someone to have an abortion, or even a person who interferes with the right of that woman to receive, for example, help from the pregnancy center, is contradicting her newly articulated constitutional right in Ohio. Ohio has instituted a constitutional right to continue one's pregnancy. And no one shall, again using the words of the amendment, directly or indirectly, burden, penalize, prohibit, interfere with, or discriminate against the exercise of that right, or anyone who helps exercise that right. That would include all the pregnancy centers. Are there forced abortions? Many more than we realize. Can this amendment be used to boomerang against the abortion industry and stop those coerced abortions? Absolutely. Use it. Use it in conversation. Promote awareness of this far and wide. I want to thank you, pro-life citizens of Ohio, furthermore, for the tremendous Vice President of the United States that we have. Thanks for letting him serve all the rest of us in the office of the Vice President. What a great man, what a great leader, what a great example, and what a great voice for our movement. Thank you, Vice President J.D. Vance. Thanks to all of you in Ohio who have encouraged and formed him over the years, including in his pro-life convictions. Thank you furthermore for what you will do this November for the special, not this November, but November of the midterms, for the special election that will fill the seat. Of course, the seat has been filled by appointment, but now the election will be held for that seat that J.D. did hold. Let's win it. Let's win it across the nation so that we can not only keep but increase our majorities both in the Senate and in the House. Brothers and sisters, you know how important that is for our pro-life progress nationwide. We talk about the work of, and all of you in Ohio are doing this, changing hearts and minds on abortion. We know that's critically important. We talk about the work of changing laws and policies and court decisions, and that goes hand in hand with changing hearts and minds. You do them both at the same time and they impact one another. But there's a third lane that we have to talk more about. We all know about it, but we don't think of it on par with those other two lanes. We change minds and hearts, we change laws and policies. What's the third lane? We weaken the abortion industry. And I mention that in this context because we have seen, with the passage of the big, beautiful bill, and thank you to President Trump and to the leadership in the House and the Senate, we have seen the funding mechanism, the biggest funding mechanism of all, that can only be either approved or rejected by an act of Congress. We literally finally saw an act of Congress stop that funding. The fact that it's just for 1 year doesn't take away from the magnitude of that victory. It's the biggest victory we had since the Dobbs decision. But it also underscores our responsibility moving forward to win the Senate elections, to win the House elections for the 2026 midterms, so that this defunding of, and it's not only Planned Parenthood, it's the entire abortion industry, continues. We don't want it to be a blip on the screen or the exception to the rule. We want it to become the rule, standard and for good. And winning these elections, focusing on it starting now, don't think of the midterms as next year, think of it as now. Winning these elections, brothers and sisters, is essential to continuing to stop that funding. And stopping that funding is an essential part of weakening the abortion industry. And weakening that industry, together with changing hearts, minds, and laws, is essential to ending abortion. I think back, as I give you these greetings today, to my countless trips throughout Ohio since I began full-time pro-life leadership in 1993. I think of friends like the late Dr. Jack and Barbara Wilkie, with whom I visited so often there in Ohio. You know their history. And our friend Brad Mattis, who took over from Dr. Wilkie with the Life Issues Institute. I think of Janet Folger Porter, who spearheaded an effort that I got behind right away, as soon as she came out with it. Of course, the heartbeat legislation, which has been so much a part of Ohio's history in this great movement. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, all of you, so many of whom I know. others of whom I want to get to know. Because in giving you these words of greeting, I want to extend to you the promise of help, ongoing assistance and encouragement, resources and joint strategic efforts of Priests for Life as you continue the work of making Ohio stronger and redder and more pro-life. I want to also give a shout out to Heartbeat International, of course, their work, and Peggy and Mike Hartshorn, and based there in Columbus, and the Option Line, and all the great things. Ohio brings so much to this movement. Thank you for that. We're going to work heart and heart, hand in hand with you, march alongside you, whether physically in these events or symbolically throughout the course of the year, and have no doubt we will reach our goal. Remember, as I always say, we're not just working for victory in this movement. We are working from victory. Victory is our starting point because Jesus Christ is risen. He has abolished death. He has revealed life immortal, and he shares it with us. He walks among us. He marches with you today. He lives within us. He speaks through us. He strengthens the work of our hands, and he brings his victory to bear on every aspect of our culture, our laws, and our lives. Embrace him, proclaim him, celebrate him, and continue with the victory of life. God bless you.